Welcome to Marketing MASH, brought to you by themarketingscope.com.
First of all, welcome to the Marketing MASH, brought to you by the Marketing
Thank
Scope.
you.
I'm Eric Vidal, Editor and Chief Content Officer. And today, our wonderful host, Shelly Kramer, President of V3 Broad Suite, speaker, writer, and social media extraordinaire as well, is with us. So welcome, Shelly.
Hello.
And we may have a couple of other hosts or guests jumping in, but today our main guest is Tim Hughes, Business Development Director for Oracle in the UK, and really a social selling expert. And thank you and welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
Let's get started first by explain to the audience or to us, what's your main goal, or your main role at Oracle?
So I have a role which we call business development, which is really right at the top of the funnel. So it's all about finding opportunities for salespeople, and that can be working with telesales teams, if I can talk about telesales from a social selling perspective, or it can be working with marketing. It's really just about trying to get them. What we're trying to do is get our sales force in front of customers and try to get away from them having to do a lot of demand generation. So that's really what the role is.
Yeah, I think what's unique, Tim, about you and your past and your success is you're actually doing selling. And
I'm back carrying salesman for 27 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how has social media impacted the way you sell the last few years? And I know you've been doing social selling or social media for about 6 years, but has social selling been a part of that sales process for 6 years?
Yeah, so I've been on Twitter for about 6 years, and I've been trying to get social into the process. And that starts off, or it started off because the discussion was around creating opportunities. But I'm now using social through the whole of the sales process. So I interviewed a guy, and I've got a blog coming out hopefully on Monday, who actually closed a deal using WhatsApp. So what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to open the debate around using social for the whole. For salespeople, you should be using it the whole time when they're selling, and not just using it to actually get some leads.
So how do you think social selling's impacted the business for you or for your
massively? Yeah. We're getting we're getting tangible results. And for example, we're using social media listening for during deals to understand what our competitors are doing. So there was a particular opportunity that we were working on where I can't name it on an open forum, but it was a large transaction for us. And it was one of those where, you probably get this, where people are saying, you've spoken to us, we've now written a request for proposal on RFP, the shutters are coming down, and the people that respond to the RFP that gets the highest score wins. And it's never like that. It's the person who wins the RFP is the people they want to buy. And by listening to social media, we actually spotted that they connected with with a VP in our competition, and we were able to go into that particular prospect and say, "I thought you said all the shutters were down and we couldn't meet anybody," and it just so happened that opened up the conversation. And we're not saying that actually won us the deal, but as a tactic, as part of the sale, I think it was important.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Hey, Tim, let's go back a second. And I know I've seen you state it in a few different places, but these 5 pillars for success for a social selling initiative. Can you kind of?
I'm just getting a cup of tea brought for me, so it's live on air. Thank you.
Oh, great.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah,
that's wonderful.
Nobody brings me tea.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm British. You've got to drink tea, haven't I?
It's not. I don't take exception to the fact that you drink the tea. I'm just saying nobody brings me tea. I go get it myself. Seriously, I need to work on that. So anyway, I'm jealous, but just go on.
Okay. So I've been involved in the social selling rollout in Western Europe for Oracle. So we rolled out across 600 salespeople with all the people around. It's about 2,000 people, and I was involved in that for about 18 months, maybe 2 years, and still am involved in it. I was doing some social selling training this morning, and what I found from that particular project was that there were certain things that were successful and certain things that weren't successful, and I took that and called it my 5 pillars, which are the things that if an organization is implementing social selling as a strategy, they need to be thinking about across the organization. So so I don't think that social selling is about just LinkedIn. There's a whole number of things that you need to be looking at across that, across your enterprise. And it covers marketing, it covers the sales process, it covers a wide spectrum of people in the organization.
Yeah, one of the things I've heard you say often is it's a lot about social listening, but you also weave in marketing automation, right? So it's taking those conversations online and maybe moving them offline and trying to get them in the funnel, if you will. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I need to declare an interest that we own Eloqua. So we obviously sell Eloqua, and if we look at selling when I started off, I was in that situation where you were looking for people to sell to, and you'd contact them and they'd say, give me a call in 3 months, or give me a call in 6 months, and you could do and just throw those in the bin. Or what I would do is, in going back 20 years, you'd send them an email and say, I've got this webinar coming up, wouldn't that be a good idea? Or I've got this white paper, why don't you have a read of it? And now, just by using automation, you can just put them all into Eloqua or whatever marketing automation system you use, and it does it all for you. And again, it's all about opting in and nurturing is all about making sure that the salesperson has more time in front of the customer.
Yeah. So I got a text from somebody. I'll leave nameless, but they wanted me to ask you a question.
Okay.
So, and I'm not sure if this is a term or maybe it's an inside joke between you and him, but can you tell me about these fluffy social selling people, or as he states, the fluffy McFluffsters, and how are they different than some of the things that you and your group are doing?
I'm not sure that we're doing. I'm not quite sure what he's talking about. But my background is sales, and I make no apology that I'm a sales guy. And the way that I write and the way that I blog is all about helping salespeople make their number quicker. And that's really what I'm about in terms of social selling. It's about how do we close deals, how do we get in front of customers, how do we create opportunities, and how do I get salespeople making new salespeople? How do I get them making their number quicker, get them up and running quicker? So,
what are some common mistakes some of these newer salespeople maybe do when trying to implement social selling into their techniques and into their strategy? I'll give you an example. So I get sold to a lot over the years. I come from the B2B marketing side, and now I'm on the media side, but I still get sold a lot. One little pet peeve of mine is when somebody connects with me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and within just a few hours or even a few minutes, then I get the ask like, "Hey, are you? I have this great platform or this great solution. Can we talk today or tomorrow, etc." So,
like, I don't have a life.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one thing that stands out from my perspective on a hiccup during the social selling process. I mean, that's kind of where I'm getting at, Tim. What are some things that you see some more novice social sellers doing that they could be better at?
Well, it's not it's not social selling, is it? It's spamming. If you're going to if people want to contact me. I've had some great contacts where they've read a blog or they've seen what I've done, and they've made contact, and then they've paraphrased the blog, or I like what you're writing, or looks really good. But I've had the people that and they connect to me. I don't know who they are, and then the next minute you've got this thing, and I don't even understand what they're talking about, and they want to have some time, and unfortunately I have to just delete those. I just don't have time for it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Shelley.
No, that's okay. I think that it goes, we've had this conversation before in this space, Eric, and I think that what we see is that for some reason, because the internet is involved and social media channels are involved, many times salespeople, business development people think that there's an easy button. And, what has happened as a result of that spam-like behavior is that I get LinkedIn requests all the time, and I look very carefully to see, is this person in business development? Because if you are, I might not connect with you, because I know that what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell to me. And what happens is that those few a-holes ruin it for everybody else. Because I like salespeople. I train sales teams too, and we have the same problem. To your point, Eric, I'll say something else. One of the things that I do when somebody asks to connect to me, especially on LinkedIn, is I go over and look at their profile. And when and sometimes I know that they might have a product they want to sell or something, but I read their profile. I look at their experience. I look at their summary section. And if there's no value proposition in there for me in terms of what they might bring to the table, I don't need to be connected to you just to be connected. So I think that experienced salespeople don't pay attention to putting their best foot forward in the social media space. And they don't develop their social profiles in a way that sounds professional, in a way that invites people to reach out to them for information about what their solution might deliver. And I think that they want to rush, and I haven't even shaken your hand yet. Don't try to make out with me. But you know what? The thing of it is that relationship building in real life, you don't go that fast. You say, hey, Tim, it's great to meet you. And you have a little conversation, and then you go to lunch another time, and then you kind of get to know each other. But because you add the internet in there, all of a sudden salespeople just want to cram it all down your throat as quickly as possible. And I think that's the most off-putting thing that there is. And I find that that's not just novice salespeople wanting to use social selling. It's sometimes very experienced salespeople and business development people that just don't get it.
Yeah, I totally agree. We both know the CEO of Nimble. I always use this as an example, and he asked for an hour with me, which was fine, and I knew I was going to get a demo, and that's okay as well, and we were having a call. He's in California, so the usual thing that I get when we have a call with California is we have a discussion about the weather, about how hot it is. What time it is and stuff like that, and you just have those things to open up the conversation. But he opened up the conversation with me and said, "So Tim, what's your favorite vinyl record?" So we'd never actually met before,
right?
And he had gone on and onto the internet and researched and found out that I have a Twitter account which is a vinyl record shop,
right?
And we spent the first 15 minutes talking about concerts that we've been to and things like that. And it was a completely different conversation where it wasn't creepy and it wasn't weird. But what he did was he'd actually researched me and actually had spent time to find out about me. And I tell this story all the time. And I think it was a great example of where somebody had done their research because they wanted to sell, but they wanted to know who their customer was.
Right. Absolutely. And I use that same kind of example when I do LinkedIn training for sales teams. And one of the things that I tell them is that, when you leave things off, for instance, your vinyl records, your penchant for vinyl records is an important part of who you are. And I think in the big scheme of life and in business, what we're looking for is we're looking to do business with and to spend time with and to trust in people who have like interests and similar goals. And so one of the examples I use is that I was working with somebody and we were developing a LinkedIn profile, and he was an Eagle Scout and has been involved in the Boy Scouts organization for many, many, many years. And to lots and lots of people, that doesn't mean anything. But to somebody who really knows what being an Eagle Scout means, that's the person they want to do business with. Or maybe you're a marathoner, or maybe you climb mountains. It doesn't have, there's so many different things, and we leave those things out of our profiles, or we put them in profiles and people don't do their homework. So one thing for sure is, if you're a salesperson and you're developing your social profiles, be human and put those personal things in there. But secondly, if you're doing your research, the information is right there. All he had to do was go to the Google and there's your information. And but all he really did was he cared enough to take time to find out more about you. And that's really the key to social selling. Take time to care enough,
There's no button that you can press where you suddenly get thousands of followers and you're a social seller. It takes time to do it. But has things really changed? Because if when I first started in sales and I was on my first sales course, you were told when you go into the meeting what you need to do is build rapport. So on the walls will be pictures, and it'll be fly fishing or football or something like that. And what you do is you start a conversation about that. And then through the sales process, you'll actually, if it was fly fishing, you'd know about all the little flies because you'd actually be wanting to understand the person and get close to them. And all that's happened is that we've moved that offline online. And I think some people, like what you said earlier on, which is about the internet, just because it's the internet doesn't mean it's fast and it's instant. We still have to take the time to find out people. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's hard. It's hard for many people. It's hard to understand. I don't know how much either of you use Twitter on a day-to-day basis, but I used to be so in love with Twitter. And it's become one of my least favorite social networks now, only because it's become kind of a spam fest. And if you find somebody that you're interested in following, without fail, you get a direct message back that says, "Thanks for following me. Make sure to follow my blog, or make sure to like my Facebook page, or make sure." And it's just like the whole rules of, "Hey, it's great to know you," have just gone out the window, and people want to be on the fast track to everything without really investing in any relationship building, and it really kind of pisses me off.
I'm a big Twitter fan, and for salespeople, I still think it's one of the best places for them to actually get and connect with and find people to have conversations with and ultimately get meetings. I have to admit, even though I'm a social seller, I still do. My sales team still do cold calling, and we do cold calling days. And one of the salespeople said to me, "That was a waste of time." So what's that? I said, "Well, I just rung everybody that I wanted to ring, and all I got was voicemail." And it was then he said, "Surely there's a better way." And I said, "Well, actually, Peter, there is." And I've taken them through. I don't know if I've written the blog about a friend of mine who's getting 10 C-level meetings a week by using Twitter. And I usually say, even if you were making one C-level meeting a week, you'd be in a better place than you are right now. And that's really about how. And this is, and I'm going to repeat what we've just said in the last 10 minutes, which is this is about somebody who's gone onto social networks. They've investigated people. They've looked to see what they've liked, and then they've made contact using that knowledge. So there was a human resources director that someone wanted to get hold of. They couldn't really find them on LinkedIn, but they found them on Instagram, and they found out that they like cats.
Doesn't everybody?
Absolutely. I mean, it wouldn't be the internet without a cat, would it? And they created a word swag with a picture of a cat, and they got a contact. They got a meeting, and just by doing a little bit of research. And whereas if you use InMails, what's the rejection rate? Something like 80%.
Right. Well,
so.
And I think innovative salespeople, I have people do that to me all the time because I have kind of a big personality. Hi, Daniel.
Hi,
I have
Dan.
kind of a big personality, and people know, if they spend any time checking me out, they know that I like food. I like chocolate. I really like beer. I love Milk Duds. I like Cheddar Jack Cheez-Its. And so I have marketers who want to get my attention, whether it's about a CRM or marketing automation platform or any kind of, they don't have to work very hard to get to know me and to get to know what I like. And really interesting packaging.
Is that?
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
So let me, what she's going to, I think, taking a quick break here, but so one of the things that Tim, you and Shelley both said was doing a lot of listening and trying to find out more about the person from a personal perspective.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. What about doing a lot of listening and trying to understand them from a strategic perspective or what's important to them professionally? And what I mean by that is, let's say the CEO had mentioned in a recent webinar, these 3 things are very important this quarter and for the rest of the year. And you were to bring one of those up to this director or VP that you're trying to reach out to via social, or maybe you heard that executive or that leader that you're trying to get through to, and they mentioned something recently in social that's very important to them, and you were able to come in and kind of start the conversation and add value or input over a period of time. That's happened to me. I've been social sold that way, and I found it very well, it was great because 1 is they knew what our key strategies were. 2, they were trying to educate and help me with something that's important to my boss and to my group. So I guess that's a question really for everyone. And welcome Daniel Newman, by the way. Daniel, please meet Tim. I know you guys have met socially, but
I'm a huge social media fan. I share his stuff on LinkedIn all the time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'm heading to your neighborhood later today.
That'll be fantastic. Yeah. So you can have tea and crumpets and
no way. Warm beer? No warm beer. I don't drink warm beer.
Yeah. Indian food.
So it's a pleasure to actually meet you face to face. Amazingly, this is a social selling example of people who have been talking for a year or 2 years of social, going back and forth and engaging and actually never meeting, but it takes time. So what were you asking, Eric?
Well, my question was, Tim and Shelley had brought up about doing listening and then trying to reach out from a personal perspective. My question, I won't repeat the long question I asked, but what about doing listening and reaching out and trying to educate or get input or join the conversation from a strategic perspective, or what's important to that person because you listened to a webinar or a speech that their CEO gave a couple of weeks before, or you're listening to them on social and they're saying what their interests are, or what their goals are, or what's important to them from a professional perspective, and be able to jump in and assist and guide and educate. And by the way, that was a long version, but
it's a great question. Since I've been outside, I'll jump in really quickly, but I mean, I do this all the time. If you want to meet somebody, the first thing I do via the various social channels is I start looking for opportunities to just talk to them in a completely conversational fashion. I'll look at blog posts they might have written. I'll look at what they're sharing on Twitter or LinkedIn. If we're not connected, Facebook's usually the last connection I make because although not all of my contacts are what I would call close friends, I definitely don't invite everybody that I might connect with on Twitter to become a friend on Facebook. But, just the other day I saw someone from a company that I definitely think I could sell something to and add value to. And I saw her on my profile. So instead of actually going back to her profile, looking at it and then sending her an invite and trying to sell her something, I went to her profile and looked at what she's published. And I realized she was a blogger. And she wrote a blog about something. And then I went into the comment stream and I just left a thought, I thought out a comment that challenged her. Because it was funny because she was in tech company, and she was talking about how she thinks she was a marketer for an AV tech company that thought live streaming was going to be a big thing. And as someone that does it, I left a comment that says, I love that. I would love to hear how your brand winds up using live streaming to drive customers and customer service inside of this industry. And that opened up a door to have a conversation. And, we've connected. I probably won't try to sell anything for months to come because I'm not going to jump right in that arena. And Jack will probably go crazy on me for saying that because Jack wants to sell. But my point is, I do believe you add value first. And when you've added enough value, that sale starts to sort of naturally transcend. It starts to naturally happen because they're like, I find value in every conversation we have. I would love to find a way to work together because people want to work with people who add value to their lives.
Imagine
I agree, yeah.
I know, it seems obvious.
I know. You're such a smooth operator.
Smooth operator. That's more your generation.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Daniel.
I just sang on camera.
I like it.
I'll make sure to edit that.
So I have a question for Tim. And I don't know if you've talked about this, but Tim, I noticed you are starting to create your own, like you're taking data points and creating needs, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm doing what?
You've been taking like really high quality data points that are relevant to digital transformation and marketing. You've created this series of memes that are sort of, yeah. I love what you're doing there. You get a lot of engagement on your LinkedIn. Like a lot of people.
Oh, loads of engagement. It's fantastic.
Facebook,
it's brilliant. Yeah.
The hub, but I think LinkedIn is a bigger hub for you. Has been a bigger demand gen, a bigger social selling leadership. You've stood out from the crowd from LinkedIn.
Well, I've always thought that for business to business, which is what I work in, it's LinkedIn and Twitter, and I put a lot of work into LinkedIn and I get a lot of engagement from it, and it's fantastic. I think the only thing that holds me back probably is the fact that LinkedIn's a bit clunky. And doesn't allow you to have the engagement and the conversations like you and I would on Facebook, and so it's just a pity that you can't have proper conversations. But yeah, LinkedIn's working well.
But what are some of your, for the audience out there? Like I said, I see you get photos and you share an image on digital transformation, and you'll have 75, 100 likes on an image, and one thing I've noticed is an image lasts a long time. I have people liking image posts that I put up like 3 months ago. So what have been some of your key strategies to use LinkedIn? Because I think a lot of people out there really are stumbling on themselves. And, I know, Shelly, I would ask you, but I've heard yours. So this is as much for me as for the audience. But what are some of the things that you're doing on LinkedIn that have really proven have been what separated you and gotten you as seen as this top social seller across so many different channels?
I would say that I spend a lot of time searching for high quality content, and it's and I have a very clear view or vision in my mind about what it is that people that my audience enjoys. And I sift through an awful lot of stuff, and I only put out stuff that I think is high quality. And that's the way that I've always wanted to actually stand out, whether it's high quality in terms of what I've created and what I've curated, or what I've written myself. And as I said earlier before you arrived, the way that I write is to write for the salesperson, because I think that social selling is for the salesperson, not just Jack, the salesperson, but salespeople out there, And so I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I'm looking at my Mac. My girlfriend says it's like mission control, but it takes an awful lot of time. I guess that social media is probably my hobby, and if you've got a hobby that you enjoy, then you're kind of in a good place on it.
Interesting. So it's not what you actually. I know you're in a social selling role, but you wouldn't consider social media your gig. You consider it your hobby.
I would say it's my hobby. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hey Tim, so where do you see social selling evolving to somewhere down the road, say 2-3 years from now? Do you think it'll be the same, or how can it be better?
Well, we could have a long discussion about where social is going and whether it's networks or messaging, um, and the way that people are using social differently from, we're moving people don't like reading, so we're moving more to visuals and video and things like what we're doing now. But one of the things that I interviewed a guy for an article 2 weeks ago who's using WhatsApp to close a deal, and he came up with a really interesting point, which I don't know if it's the same in the US as it is in the UK, but traditionally we had a lot of we would have a lot of free newspapers and a lot of things where there was this kind of apprenticeship in sales, where we had people that were doing telesales day in, day out, selling small value items, and those jobs don't exist anymore because those newspapers don't exist anymore, and so what we're not getting coming through are the salespeople that will replace us, or the people that are in their 30s. So sales will naturally change because we don't have that apprenticeship. And I think that what we'll find is that we'll find that social in itself will mature, and social changes and is changing all the time. And each salesperson will find new ways. Shelley, you were saying earlier on that Twitter had just become a nightmare because it's loads and loads of people pushing out corporate stuff. And I think what will happen is that the salespeople will move to the next platform. Maybe it's LinkedIn, and then what we'll do is we'll get loads and loads of people just shoving out corporate stuff that nobody reads, and then we'll move on to the next platform. So that's kind of where I see things going. And if you want to debate whether we're moving to messaging or video or whatever, that's kind of probably a different conversation. Yeah.
I want to back up for just a second, though, and address your comment, Tim, about social and social selling being a hobby. That's great. I would probably maybe argue with that a little bit based on your experience and what you've been charged with doing for Oracle the last couple of years, that it's probably more your gig than it is a hobby. But I think there's a couple things. I was just having this conversation with somebody today. My attorney and I were having a meeting, and she was saying, oh my God, I go to LinkedIn and, all I see is your stuff. You just share so much stuff. And I said, well, you know what? You probably have do you have a small connection base? And she said, yeah, I only have 100 connections or something like that. And I said, you understand that the smaller your connection base is, the more you're going to see from somebody like me who has 4,000 LinkedIn connections and who's sharing content, and who I'm seeing so much more content than you are. But to back up a little bit, I don't think today's salespeople have the luxury of thinking that social can be a hobby. I think that if you're wired for consuming content, understanding what your audience wants and needs, knowing how to share it well and quickly, that's a double bonus when you're in sales. If you're not wired that way, you better figure it out, because it's part of your job as a salesperson to cover those channels where your customers are. Some of your customers may be offline, some of your customers may be online, but really omni-channel is the word. And so I really don't feel like, and of course, argue with me if you think that I'm wrong, but I don't think today's salesperson, and believe me, Daniel and I mean, we encounter lots of clients whose sales teams aren't using social in any meaningful way whatsoever. I mean, they still very much don't get it. And they feel like it's an annoyance, or it's, it's just such a hassle or whatever. And, we are pretty confident that, 100% of your audience may not be on social, but you just can't ignore those channels. So maybe speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I was talking about myself, and I was probably being naturally English and modest. So I would, social takes up an awful lot of my life, and I do a lot, and I do an awful lot out of work. And so I kind of feel that is my hobby. Going back to, I gave a presentation today to some people, and I unfortunately probably came over a little bit confident. And I was presenting to another sales team, and I, I'm so passionate about this that I can't believe that people aren't using social. And it's like, and I get a lot of the, well, why I don't have time for this. It's like, I'm sorry, but
figure it out.
It's like, sorry, this is what we do. This is how you sell nowadays.
Right.
And I'm comfortable enough, having sold for so many years, and I also have, great counsel in Jack, who gives me lots of advice as well. And this is what you do now. Social is, it's not about you that you need to try it. This is how we work now. And I've seen that tipping point certainly over the last 2 years, and certainly from some of the people that I've been talking to, certainly over the last 6 months, 12 months.
Right. Well, I'm right there with you on that front. I think we all are.
So, Eric, more questions?
No, you know what? Having said that, we're past the half-hour mark.
Okay.
I do have a whole bunch more questions, but I think in the honor of time, let's go ahead and wrap this up. First of all, Tim, thank you so much for your time and your insights. And Shelley, Daniel, thank you for all the great questions and the conversation.
Great to meet you.
Thanks for hanging out with us, Tim.
That's it for this episode of Marketing Mash. You can share your thoughts by following us on Twitter and Facebook. Subscribe to our podcast to keep up with the show. And of course, you can always find us by visiting themarketingscope.com.